Hello and welcome to the brand new show, Justin and Donald Save America. How is it going, ladies and gentlemen, across this great country? As always, I'm going to be your host, Donald Kendal, joined by my partner in saving the world, Justin Haskins. How's it going, good sir?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited. This is going to be a great experience. I'm really excited for this show.
Yeah, a little behind the scenes. This has been a project long in the making, very, very long in the making. We're finally pulling the trigger on it. As you can see, we spared no expense. We've got some cool graphics. We got some cool stuff planned for you throughout the duration of this show as we get into future episodes and all of that. But we wanted to kind of start off this episode, maybe just kind of, I don't know, we probably shouldn't get to know you or anything because that's boring. But just to kind of give you the feel for what this show is going to be. Yeah. Get a feel for what the show is going to be, kind of the topics that we're going to plan on covering, and especially the tone that we're going for. So if we can establish all of those things over the course of this next hour, I think it would be a successful episode. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that people will hopefully stick with us and get to know us over time. That's what I'm going for. I want people to really get to know me intimately over time as we do the show. But in the beginning, I mean, does anyone really care who we are or what we have to say? No, not really. They just you're gonna have to stick with us. And if you don't stick with us, then you're dead to me. And don't ever come back because we don't want you.
You're obviously an enemy of America. I mean, if we're trying to save America and you're not with us,
right?
Where does that leave you? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. No, look, Donnie and I have known each other for a while, for several years. We work together at a think tank. Do we even talk about the think tank? We should probably talk about the think tank. We work together at the Harlan Institute. It's a national, nonprofit, pro-liberty think tank. And we both met each other as interns, believe it or not. Donnie looked exactly the same as he does now. Hasn't changed at all. I look pretty much the same, just with a little bit less hair, which is why I wear the hat. And basically, we've right from the very beginning, great conversations about all sorts of crazy things going on in the world. We were at a think tank, you imagine there are people just sort of sitting around thinking and talking about policy and politics and stuff. There's not as much of that as you would probably hope, but with us, there always was. We always had that. We were always interested in that. And so we would have these incredible conversations. And I don't know how many times, dozens of times, we'd be like, this should really be recorded. We should really be recording this right now, right?
Right.
And
that might be the genesis of this entire thing.
I mean, it probably is.
Because, the people that have followed us know that we've been on the In the Tank podcast, right? We've kind of carried that for a very long time. And I've always tried to kind of capture some of that conversations that you and I would have over the phone or something like that. And it's never really materialized. So I'm really hoping that this setting could really kind of harness those conversations just in a podcast form. That's what I think we're going for.
Yeah, here. Exactly. So why are we qualified to have a podcast? I mean,
who isn't?
Yeah, exactly. Essentially everyone has a podcast these days. I will say that the thing that kind of makes us unique is that you and I have had a very bizarre sort of history of predicting things that seem like crazy things in the future, but turn out to be things that actually happen.
Sure.
As we're way ahead of the curve. Okay.
Ahead of the curve.
Which is why we're saving America. We realized at some point that if America just listened to us, everything would be a whole lot better. So that's really what the mission of this podcast is to get people to actually listen to us so that we can avert disaster essentially and save the world. That's the plan. So, I mean, we've done all kinds of amazing things. We've, done presentations at CPAC, and we've spoken all across the country at, LibertyCon in Washington, D.C., and we've done events in Washington State
Denver.
and Denver, Colorado, and all sorts of places. We've worked with Glenn Beck on a couple different books, and people will learn about that throughout this podcast because we love the name drop. But our favorite book of all time, Arguing with Socialists, That's what
That's right.
Donnie's holding up there if you're watching it on YouTube.
Which, if you aren't, you should. I mean,
Yeah, you totally should. It's a much better experience. And so, we've worked with Glenn Beck on these big projects, other people at the Blaze. I've done a million TV spots on Fox News and OAN and Newsmax and you name it. And so,
Rachel Maddow show.
No, I've never done Rachel Maddow. I did get invited on MSNBC one time, which I'll tell the audience about that someday. And The Daily Show, which I turned down, which was a really good choice. On the day that Bernie Sanders was on. Now, if they had told me that, I know, I may have done it. But anyway, that's besides the point. Basically, we have all this knowledge. We have all these great ideas. We talk about stuff all the time. We just don't do a very good job of recording it. So we're gonna try our very best to make this very conversational, to talk about things that you're not hearing elsewhere, so that you're not just hearing the same regurgitated story over and over and over and over and over again. We've taken the things we love about some podcasts, and we've tried to stay away from the things that we hate about other podcasts, and then put our own unique, twist on all of this. But the main thing is we want to try to make this experience as close to what it's like to being in the room with us when we're having these conversations, because they're good conversations. And we think that you'll get a lot out of it. You'll learn a lot. We'll learn a lot from you. We're looking forward to interacting with the audience and doing things like that in the future. And we just think it's going to be, we're really excited. This is the most excited I've been, frankly, to do a project in a long time.
So another thing that you talked about, like the think tank world, if you just imagine what it's like to be inside the halls of one of these Washington, D.C. based think tank, you'd almost think like the parameters are pretty much set out for the workers in there. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, to some extent, that's the case at the Heartland Institute, but it wasn't necessarily the case. I feel like we've always kind of had like a longer leash when it comes to stuff. Like I mentioned in the Tank podcast, that was just created on a whim. This setting, even though that podcast, it's got its own little template and everything, right? You don't stray too far from the template and all of that. This, I feel like we're just going to be unconstrained. The leash is off. We're going to do whatever we want when we want. We're going to talk about what we want when we want. Yeah. That's the point of Justin and Donald Save America.
Yeah, exactly. We're finally taking that libertarian name and we're running with it. We're no rules. This is an anarcho-capitalist podcast. Not really, but
no,
not at all, actually. But that's the point.
Yeah, and before we get into just a couple more, just kind of figuring out how the show is going to work things, I will tease that the meat of this episode, which you'll probably see in the title, is going to be the 3 terrifying truths you won't hear from the media. So that's going to be the main thrust of this episode. So I just want to tease that out there before everyone loses interest because Justin keeps talking about his Fox News appearances or anything like that. But so that's what you've got in store for you, the 3 terrifying truths. But the other thing that we want to do, because one thing that Justin already mentioned this, we wanted to take the things that we like from other podcasts, discard things that we don't like. One thing that I think Justin will completely agree with me is that I really dislike just like the outrage du jour concepts, right? Every time you turn on Facebook or even flip on Fox News or anything like that, you'll see these news stories about just some frivolous thing that you're supposed to be upset about. And 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, people are more upset about this than they should be. Maybe it's upsetting, I get it. But it's like people act like it's a 10 on the Richter scale when it's actually probably like a 3, So I do want to discuss those things, to an extent. But like, we're not going to get wrapped up in just like, did you hear the new Ghostbusters movie is all women social justice warrior? Let's storm the gates of AMC or something like that.
Storm the gates. That's
I don't know.
Not a good thing to suggest.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're 100%.
But on the other side of the coin, we want to talk about very important stuff, things that you and I, like you mentioned, we're a little ahead of the curve when we're trying to predict some of this stuff, whether it's, the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party reaching prominence, AOC and her democratic socialism kind of taking the country by storm.
Green New Deal, we're way ahead on that one.
Great. Yeah, the Green New Deal, the Great Reset, all of these types of things, modern monetary theory, surveillance state type stuff, social credit scores. Like, these are the things that we want to talk about. These are the things that we want to elaborate on, get really in depth in each episode. That's kind of what we want to do on this podcast. The thing that might seem a little contradictory, though, is we want to talk about all these very important things, but still have a playful attitude towards it. So again, that might seem a little contradictory, but we don't want to talk about all this doom and gloom stuff and get to a point where everyone's just apathetic and don't care. You know, like if the enemy's at the gates and you have nothing to defend yourself, like you're just going to lay down because there's nothing else to do. We don't want that. So we want to continue this tone of just, you know, a little bit of playfulness, some fun and energy and stuff, even though we're talking about some of these things that seem a little overbearing and kind of frightening.
Yeah, without a doubt. And look, America is facing some incredible challenges. There's no doubt about that. More times, I can't even count how many times over the past year I've called you up and said, we're screwed. You know, we're screwed. We're done. It's all over. I mean, how many times we've talked about this over and over and over again. You know, I mean, this feeling of like this doom and gloom that kind of comes over. But at the end of the day, I actually still feel optimistic. Not optimistic that certain things that we seem to be heading towards we're going to be able to avoid, or that, you know, the Republican Party is going to come in and save us. They're not. You know, there's a lot of things I'm not optimistic about, but I'm optimistic that there are enough people in this country that still truly do want to be free. Even some people who consider themselves to be leaning on the left or whatever, who are not authoritarians, they're not crazy, they're not, you know, Antifa types, right? They're not AOC supporters. There are a lot of people out there who really do want to be free. And I believe at the end of the day, that we will eventually get to that. It might be painful. There might be a gigantic Great Depression-like period of time in our lifetimes. There probably will be. I think we both sort of think there will be. But I do believe at the end of the day, we will, as a country, or at least enough of us, will circle back to the things that made us great in the first place. Mm-hmm. And so it's that idea of there is a sense of optimism. I'm not just totally depressed that we're just going to be in chains in 15 years, you know, like that's not, I don't believe that. I do believe we're going to turn things around. I just think it's going to be really miserable until we get to that point in time. And so, you know, yeah, we could just wallow in despair and be miserable, or we can say it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. And that's the approach we're taking. We're trying to inform you. We're trying to be happy warriors about it. And we're trying to be as optimistic as possible. And I think that's the sort of the style of the show that we're going for. It's not just going to be this horribly depressing thing that you listen to, although at times it will be.
That's true. As you'll see from some of our terrifying truths that we're going to get to.
Right.
In addition to that, there's other things that we want to cover as well. You know, Justin and I are both into movies. I don't know, maybe you've seen a video from one of us talking about Star Wars movies in the past, but we're definitely into movies and pop culture, TV shows, that type of stuff. So from time to time, there's going to be discussions that are going to revolve around topics that relate to that. We've got some plans, potential guests in the works that are going to be reoccurring guests to talk about that type of stuff. But again, it's not going to be like we're not going to manufacture outrage to make our conversation about why the new Dune movie is woke or something like that, so that we can get views. Like that's not how we're going to do it. Everything that we bring to the table is going to be very, very genuine, right? We're not going to try to overplay up our outrage because a character in the new Star Wars movie has purple hair. Oh my gosh, it's insanity. We're not going to do that. So you can go, there's a million other channels where you can go and find that type of stuff. This isn't that one, but that's another kind of thing that we're going to talk about on the show. There's going to be a bunch of stuff. I mean, we'll take shots at the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders of the world and all of that. But again, you know, the outrage that we have will be completely justified by the reality of the situation. I think that's the point I'm trying to get across right here.
Yeah.
All right, Justin, any other kind of clear in the deck type stuff you want to get to? Should we jump into our terrifying truths?
Yeah, I think we should, because I think the reason we came up with these topics is to fit in with this theme as a good sort of starter, right? What do we want to talk about? We want to talk about the things that other people are not talking about. We want to avoid the stories that, you know, you're just seeing recycled over and over and over again on cable news. So these are three things that we found that we think are really important stories that you're not going to hear from the mainstream press. Now, we're going to do other episodes about these things in the future, I'm sure, and get into more detail about some of them.
No
They
doubt.
all deserve their own standalone episodes, if not multiple episodes, depending on the thing that you're talking about. And so don't think that we're just, you know, going to gloss it. This is just an intro. This is just the goal of this is just to introduce you to some of these concepts that are going to keep coming up over and over and over again. Because some of them, like number 2 or something, I don't know how you numbered them, but some of them are things that really touch upon a lot of the stuff that goes on a day-to-day basis in America.
Sure.
So
yeah, no doubt. In fact, just kind of like the kind of going along with the tone that we're trying to set for this. A lot of this is just playing it by ear. We came up with the idea of doing these 3 terrifying truths last night. I think late last night. So it was just like we knew.
I think we came up with number 3 about 20 minutes before we started.
Right. We don't have any notes. We're just going off the cuff here, and that's
right.
You know, that won't be the case for every episode. I like to plan and I like to take notes and all of that stuff, but that is not the case here. But yeah, this was just, I felt like a nice little framework to present the type of topics that you'll hear about on this show from episode to episode to episode. So the first thing that we'll talk about is the Great Reset is not a conspiracy theory, and it is closer than you think. Justin, this is an important one for sure. Why don't you take us through it a little bit?
I would argue that the Great Reset is probably the most important story going on right now. And it fits in perfectly with everything that we have just been talking about, right? We want stories that people aren't really talking about all that much. If you want to know about the Great Reset and you're watching, you know, a cable news network that leans to the right every night, you're probably not going to see anything about the Great Reset. You might hear about it every once in a while, kind of in passing, but you're not going to get the information that you really need to fully understand this topic. The Great Reset is an incredible, incredible thing. It's this international movement amongst these global elites. People at the World Economic Forum, those are the Davos people. You've got people at the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations. You've got people in the Joe Biden is all into this. John Kerry, who's in the Biden administration, has been tied to this. People at corporations and banks and all of these incredible people, activist groups, all involved with this Great Reset movement. That's the name they gave to this movement, the Great Reset, to push the reset button on the entire global economy, right?
Right.
And they've been talking about this for over a year and a half. And a lot of people, whenever anyone like you and I, you know, whenever people like us point this out, they're immediately called conspiracy theorists just for pointing it out. But when you actually listen to what these people are saying, the stuff that they've been talking about over the past year and a half is absolutely crazy. They essentially want to put global elites in charge of basically everything. They want to rewrite social contracts. That's a direct quote. They want every country must participate. Every industry must participate in the entire world. It's a completely new economy that they want to build. And for whatever reason, many people in not just the mainstream press, but even the conservative press, a lot of these people don't want to talk about it. So when we first stumbled upon this a year and a half ago, mid 2020, we were blown away by this stuff. And the more we started digging into it, the more we realized not only is this not a conspiracy theory, not only is there truth behind this, but when you actually get into the details, it gets wilder and crazier and more authoritarian than you would even think just by Googling around and looking up articles from even conspiracy theorists. A lot of the conspiracy theorists don't even get the story right. It's that crazy of a story.
Yeah, so let's go back a little bit, right? Because how did we discover it, right? So again, kind of tying into that concept that, like, you know, we want this podcast to just kind of capture the tone and feel of just the phone calls that we had.
Yeah.
Back in May of 2020, it was during the pandemic.
Yeah,
you called me up and we were talking about something probably work related, I don't know, But then towards the end of the conversation, or what I thought was going to be the end of the conversation, you're like, hey, have you heard of this like Great Reset thing? I'm like, no, I don't think so. Why? And you're like, okay, well, let me just read you off some quotes. And you start listing off all of these different quotes from like UN people, that Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum. I don't think John Kerry said his quote yet about the Great Reset. Greenpeace people, like Prince Charles, like seven or eight big name people, all saying the specific phrase, the Great Reset, right?
Yep.
And then there was some other terminology that they used that was just like, these people are clearly reading off the same playbook.
Yep.
What is this playbook, right? So then we're just like, there was enough there. There was enough smoke there that we just thought to ourselves, we should keep some tabs on this. There might be something important here. That was the genesis of the Great Reset.
Yeah,
for us, at least.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And again, like the more we started, at first we thought this was sort of just a big, sort of a way for people on the left to come up with a new slogan to pitch the stuff they've always pitched, because they talk about the Green New Deal, they talk about expanding welfare programs, government run healthcare, things like that. And so when you see those kinds of things, you immediately think, well, that's all this is. It's just some weird, creepy version of that. But in reality, which was exciting. I mean, we thought that was kind of exciting. They're putting this creepy branding on their normal, garbage ideas, right? But in reality, it was so much worse than that. It turns out that for years and years and years, they've been building this framework underneath the surface while no one's been paying attention to it. This whole new framework to evaluate businesses, to provide essentially a social credit score to companies and businesses and even individuals based on your investment portfolio in order to determine who the good guys are and who the bad guys are in the economy. And then they've had all these meetings about, well, how do we use these scores to force companies to adopt our policies and ideas, and how do we punish the people that won't go along with this, and what about the holdouts that refuse to go along with it? And even, I mean, and the deeper you dive into it, the more insane it gets, the more conspiratorial it seems, but also the more hard evidence you find. And it's not even like you got to speculate. It's just so straightforward.
Well, yeah, and that's one thing that you'll hear about probably with a lot of topics that we talk about on this podcast, is this like them trying to brush it under the rug by just like labeling it a conspiracy theory.
Right.
And when we first started talking about this, we were just putting their quotes that these people were saying on a piece of paper in an article and publishing it on our website, stoppingsocialism.com. That's not a conspiracy. We're just reporting what these people are saying. It's not a conspiracy. But I will say that when we started kind of like putting together all of this stuff and trying to kind of map out what is the Great Reset, back then it did seem very theoretical to us. Yeah, they're saying these things, and they've got these papers talking about ESG standards and metrics and all of this, but like, that's about as far as it went. But then as we kept researching this and as we kept kind of keeping an eye on it, it's way beyond theoretical. Not only is this happening, but it's happening fast. And it's like seemingly 80, 90 yards down the field at this point. They're in the red zone. That's how it seems like now.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of frightening. The speed at which this is going is crazy.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we're going to do a whole episode just on this. Will probably be our second episode, our first real full single topic episode. So, if you really want to learn more about it, it's already going to be available by the time you watch this episode. So you can go watch that one right away. But I mean, in addition to just, because in addition to all of those crazy things that you were just talking about, all the stuff that we were discovering, we started then, and I think this is the part of this story where I realized, this has ramifications for us in America, and this is going to be a real thing that is going to happen soon, depending on how the election turns out. Because remember, this was pre-2020 election. It was during the election season this was going on. But we started hearing Joe Biden use the same language. And I remember it came up, I think it popped up on one of our phones or something like that, right? Where the story came up, and it was like a story about Joe Biden on the campaign trail. and he was pitching his Build Back Better jobs plan.
No, it was a soundbite. I was driving to
Soundbite.
work, and it was a
Yeah.
soundbite on the radio, and he mentioned the idea of stakeholder capitalism.
Right.
And I was
Yes.
like,
Yes.
wait, that is a Great Reset buzzword. Is
Yes.
he in this? And I think this was at the period of time where like Joe Biden was really lagging. Or when no, it was post primaries, right? When
Yeah, no. This is post primaries.
Okay.
He basically had it all wrapped up at this point, and he
Okay.
was out there, trying to win people over with his horrible ideas. And it was a soundbite from that event. I think it was in Pennsylvania or something like that. And it was in either June or July or somewhere around that time. And he rolls out his Build Back Better jobs plan. And during that jobs plan, he uses the phrase he essentially says we need to get rid of stakeholder capitalism. I mean, no, shareholder capitalism. We need to have and that getting rid of shareholder capitalism, that phrase, I don't think he used stakeholder, I think he used getting rid of shareholder capitalism. Now that is a common phrase among the Great Reset people, and it's super weird to hear a politician talk about something like that. It was a weird phrase to hear. So when we heard that, Donnie heard it on the radio. I remember an article popped up on my phone that said, Joe Biden says end of era of shareholder capitalism or something. And we were both just blown away by that because it could not be a coincidence. Nobody comes up with that on their own, right?
Especially not Joe Biden.
Especially not Joe Biden, who comes up with essentially nothing on his own. So who is the person whispering this in his ear? Right? Like, who's the one telling him, you should really say, we got to get rid of shareholder capital? Who's writing that into his speech? Where is that coming from? And that is and now we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, Joe Biden 100% on board with the Great Reset. But when we heard that, we realized, okay, this isn't just a European thing. This isn't just some meaningless thing that's going on in Davos. We're all just getting together and it's a happy hour and, whatever. They just slap each other on the back and talk about how wonderful they all are.
Right.
It was real. It's real, and it was translating into policy. And the more we started looking at Joe Biden's platform and seeing the parallels between what people in the Great Reset wanted and what was in his platform, and the use of the Build Back Better slogan and how that had been used by the Great Reset people, and then all of a sudden world leaders all over the place are all using Build Back Better. They're all using the same slogan. It's like, what is going on here? And at that point, we were 100% committed to figuring this thing out. And we did. I mean, I feel super, super confident at this point in time that we understand the Great Reset. And it was right around that time that's when we reached out to Glenn Beck and we told Glenn Beck, hey, you got to look into this. And he started looking into it, came to the same conclusions that we did. I remember going on his radio show in I think it was June of 2020 and talking about this. And he said to me, he says on the air, so there's a tape of it somewhere, I've never heard of any of this before.
Oh, right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so, and then we just, from there, his research team was really involved in it. And we all started sharing notes and ideas. And that's when Donnie and I started working with Glenn on a book about the Great Reset, which is coming out in January 2022. It's finally going to be finished. We've been working on it for over a year.
You've been coming out for a while.
I know. We've been working on it for a long, long time. But, the crazy thing about the book is the more, I keep talking about how the more we look into it, the more we learn, right? The more you learn, the more you have to update the book, which is an unfortunate part of writing a book. Is it's so long, and you want to make sure it's up to date and not old and stale. And so things have moved so rapidly that we had to keep updating it. But the stuff that you will read in that book, and you should read that book because it's freaking awesome. But the stuff that you'll read in that book and the stuff that you'll hear in our next episode of this podcast talking about the Great Reset is just, you're not going to hear it literally anywhere else other than maybe listening to Glenn Beck if you hit on a day where he's talking about the Great Reset. You're not going to hear it from anywhere else. So it's literally, it explains so much of what's going on in the world today. And I wish more people were paying attention to it. I think that is going to change. I think it's a hard thing for people to wrap their minds around at first. And that's why you and I are so committed to talking about it all the time, because we want people to understand it's actually, if you lay it out the right way, people can get it. They can understand the dangers of it. They can see how insidious and crazy it is. But it's really, if you're not paying attention, if you're not looking for it, It's really easy to just not find anything about it, not be confronted with this information.
Yeah, the other thing to kind of note about this is like the culmination of plans that have been in place for a long time.
Oh
So
yeah,
we realized the importance of this, like Justin said, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And like I said, theoretical, it just seemed like an idea and all of this stuff. As we figured out all the concrete pieces of this that are being put in place, we realized that some of these concrete pieces that are being put in place date back to years and years and years ago, if not
yeah,
even longer than that. So this
right,
is a thing that's been going on for a long time,
yeah,
very much under the radar. And I credit us with really bringing this to the limelight. Obviously, Glenn Beck, because
yep.
he's got a way larger audience and
Oh, without a doubt.
louder voice than we
Yep.
can project with. But we also brought it to his attention.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, and Glenn has found stuff that we didn't find,
oh, no
without a
doubt.
doubt.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But yeah, there was nobody talking about it, and you and I really sort of single-handedly. I mean, I'm gonna take some credit here. Okay, we
We're
are
pretty
saving
modest
the
people.
world. We're saving America. We are very modest people. That's why we have cartoon characters of ourselves, and we named the show "Justin and Donald Save America." It's because of how modest we are. But honestly, like, we really did bring this idea to the forefront, not just in a, again, this is not a conspiracy theory type thing. You will see people who talk about it from that perspective, and they say things that I don't think are accurate. They
Sure.
go too far with it. It gets into really bizarre things that I have not seen any evidence that support. But when you're looking at the hard data, the stuff that is real, the actual quotes, the actual plans, the actual policy proposals.
Yeah, we don't have to exaggerate stuff.
We don't.
It's crazy enough on its own.
It is, and they were very upfront about it right from the very beginning. They're going to push the reset button on the global economy. Klaus Schwab wrote in one article for Time, okay, so again, not hiding it, that he wanted to reimagine capitalism, right? I mean, these are the kinds of things that rewrite the social contract for society and for the world. I mean, these are big, grandiose statements, and a lot of people just didn't take it seriously.
Yeah, I feel like we're hesitating to kind of get in the weeds, and I think the main reason for that is we're gonna do a full episode on this.
Yeah.
We'll get into some of the details and all of that stuff in that future. And one other thing that I'll just kind of tease for that future episode is we hit a nerve, and they started running away, at least from the term the Great Reset.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll lay all of that out in the future episode.
We got to play that video in that episode of the World Economic Forum running away. It's really incredible.
Yeah, it's great.
It is.
All right, well, let's move on to number 2 here. The second terrifying truth you won't hear about in the media. Modern monetary theory has taken root and could collapse the dollar. So, very similar to the Great Reset, modern monetary theory is something that you and I probably weren't the first people to uncover this by any means.
No.
But we definitely realized the importance of it, the idea that this is the path of least resistance for the ruling class and all of that. And because it's the path of least resistance, it's the likelihood of the world leaders and all of that, so the country, the federal government adopting modern monetary theory seemed inevitable.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about this for a few years now, and the implications of this, the actual plan and how it like manifests and how they can use this to help kind of centrally control society and the economy and all of that. That's like one facet of it. But then the potential implications of this, if we were to carry this out to without any constraints or anything like that, that's a whole nother story. So again, probably all of the things we're going to talk about on this list, and we probably should have some notable ones that didn't make the list or whatever, but they'll all probably make up their own episode sometime in the future. But
a real simple explanation for modern monetary theory for those who are not familiar with it at all is that it's an idea. It's a sort of a economic philosophy that as long as you control your own currency, if you're a country and you control your own currency and you have a fiat currency system, like the United States has with the Federal Reserve, and we print our own money here, that you can essentially print as much money as you want, and it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
until you reach high levels of inflation. And then at that point in time, you, instead of printing less money, you have to implement all these controls that exist, that would exist under this model through the government in order to control prices so that inflation doesn't get out of go totally nuts and you end up with Zimbabwe and trillion-dollar bills and things like that, right? So it's this idea that you can print money, that debts and deficits don't really matter unless there's high levels of inflation. That's always the caveat. And the thing that's really crazy about it is, prior to the pandemic in 2020, because the pandemic in 2020 is modern monetary theory. If you want to know what modern monetary theory looks like, it's the pandemic lockdowns and the government response to it, where they just printed trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars they didn't have and sent people checks in the mail who didn't lose their jobs and did all of this stuff that was absolutely insane. They had no way of paying for it. They had no intention of raising taxes to pay for it. They just printed the money and they moved on. That's what modern monetary theory looked like. But when you and I started talking about it, it was pre-2020. This was like probably 2018-ish. We started hearing about this idea being circulated by these top, really well-respected academics like Stephanie Kelton, who who served in the Senate, who not as a senator obviously, but worked in the Senate on the Senate Budget Committee as one of their top economists, worked for the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign. And so we started learning about this idea and we thought, wow, Bernie Sanders clearly was into this idea because he brought her into his campaign, not just once, but twice, and brought her into the Senate Budget Committee. So we knew this idea was really popular amongst that socialist group. And AOC would say some things that kind of lent support to it and stuff. But you and I had these conversations. We're like, man, if they actually embrace this idea and they could get enough people to believe that debts and deficits don't matter, and they could just print whatever money they wanted, just imagine how much power that would be. And then they started doing that.
Right.
And they actually started exercising the power that they have. And look at what's gone on since then, right? Absolute insanity. And a lot of it comes from this idea that we don't have to tax the money to come up with it, to pay for new government programs. We can just invent it. Just invent it, push a couple buttons on a keyboard. They don't even actually have to print it. And then what do? We print the money and then we distribute it into the parts of the economy we like. We pull it out of the parts of the economy we don't like. We punish some people. We reward other people. And we raise taxes just to screw people. And that's the only reason we do it, because we don't like certain people.
Yeah, and again, we'll probably have an episode that's dedicated just to this concept. But and you'll hear this one actually gets a little bit more talk than the Great Reset one. You'll hear people talk about modern monetary theory a little bit more. Yeah,
not 2 years ago.
No, definitely not. And the way that conservatives will talk about it is that the idea these people believe that debt and deficits don't matter. Run up a national debt of $100 billion trillion. It doesn't matter. That is not necessarily the case. As Justin mentioned, they do have that caveat, which is the most important thing of their little plan here, which is you can print as much money as you want, as long as it doesn't start resulting in inflation. We can get into the weeds in that. We'll save that for the future episode when we do the.
I will just tease this though. The way that they try to stop inflation is essentially, like, their solution to the inflation problem is essentially authoritarianism.
Well, okay, and that's actually...
It's like, okay, well, we don't want inflation to get out of control, so let's just become authoritarians. Problem solved. Like, that's the solution.
That's the special herbs and spices that make this plan so important, because if it was just, you could argue that we've been doing this forever, like, what politician, other than just paying some lip service to the idea of the national debt's out of control, like, who's actually done anything about it, right? The national debt has only gone in one direction pretty much throughout the history of the country, right? Especially in modern times. But it's the plan on how to the policy prescriptions, the ideas that are built into this plan to deal with that inevitable inflation that would occur when you're printing endless amounts of money. That's what gives this plan so much power. Yeah. And it does actually tie into the Great Reset. When we do these episodes, we'll kind of, again, get into all of it. But it's basically the Federal Reserve. I don't want to really get into the weeds here, but the Federal Reserve's got one major tool when it comes to regulating modern monetary policy, and that is interest rates, right? They could move the interest rates up if there's too much inflation. They can move it down if they want to spur economic activity. It's just basically one big lever that they've
Because
got.
what happens is when you raise interest rates, then that takes money out of the money supply because it makes it harder to
When you
people
raise
are more likely to save money, right? So people are not spending as much money because they're putting it in bank accounts when they're raising interest rates high enough. But it becomes more expensive to lend, to get loans, right? Not to lend, to get loans.
Yeah.
And so because it becomes more expensive to get loans, there's less lending. And because there's less lending, there's less money circulating throughout the economy relative to the rate of increase that you had prior to that period when interest rates are lower, right? So that's how they would typically deal with this problem.
But when you read through the dogma of this modern monetary theory and how it's supposed to work, they have in there, and I think they kind of give it away. I think they gave away the plan, which is when inflation does occur, it's probably going to happen in specific industries. And when those inflations do occur in those specific industries, we'll just pass policy prescriptions to deal with those specific instances of inflation. Right. So basically, the system that we would have if we adopted modern monetary theory is replacing that one lever that the Federal Reserve has to kind of control all of this, replace it with a giant council of buttons and knobs and levers and pulleys and all of this stuff to be able to basically have your hands and meddle in every part of industry that's going to be currently thrown under the bus under the guise of dealing with inflation. So if you can't like kind of figure out just the power that this would give the policymakers if this plan ran rampant, we'll get into it in a future episode.
Right.
Also, the quotes around modern monetary theory is crazy, but again, we'll save that for later. But very important stuff. This one's near and dear to my heart. I probably bring it up more often than it should be. But like I said, it's a very important thing. Oh yeah, and lastly, it does have the potential of completely derailing the United States dollar as the world reserve currency and just wrecking the economy as we know it. But again, we'll get into the future episode. All right, number 3, the third thing, the terrifying truths that you won't hear in the media. Communism is for losers. That is right. This one might seem like a joke. It is not. So much not a joke. I have a sweatshirt commemorating this stance that we have. Communism is for losers.
That makes it seem like a joke. More like, so they're supposed to believe it's not a joke because you have a cartoon character that you made, a sweatshirt that you designed with a cartoon character Karl Marx saying communism is for loser on your sweatshirt. That's supposed to mean it's not a joke. I got it. Yeah. So
communism. Okay. So all of this originated. All of this, everything that you've seen, whether it's StoppingSocialism.com, whether it's Stopping Socialism TV on YouTube, whether it's Justin and Donald Save America, this is all kind of stemmed from one project that Justin and I have spearheaded, which is the Stopping Socialism project. And at its core, we talk about socialism, communism, collectivism, and why it's terrible, why it's evil, while it always has unintended consequences, why it should be avoided, why it always kind of brings in with it authoritarianism, all of these things. And but the problem is, and the reason why this is labeled as like what the media won't tell you, is that collectivism in one form or another is always presented as the solution to society's problems. So that's, maybe I put it in a little goofier of terms for the sake of this episode, but it's still a very important and serious takeaway, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, communism and socialism and just in general, any form of collectivist thinking is in a lot of ways, one of the deadliest ideas that has ever existed in human civilization. That's not hyperbole. That's real. If you look back at all the people who were murdered in all of these different countries because they were trying to create a socialist utopia or a communist utopia, it's more than 100 million people. It's way over 100 million people were killed, exiled, or imprisoned by socialist and communist parties. I think the number when we did the research was 167 million. 167 million people. I mean, think about that. All the people, all these lives lost. China alone, tens of millions of people in China and Russia alone. Not to mention the fact that the Nazis were socialists and all of the people that died as a result of the things they were doing with the Holocaust and in Nazi Germany and starting World War II and all of that stuff. I mean, when you look at the history of socialism, because a lot of people will look at those things and they'll say, well, you know, that's not really what socialism is. That's not really what communism is, you know, blah, 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 blah. We've gone through this a million times. The truth is, when you take it to its logical end, if you allow everything to play out the way it always plays out, no matter what the culture is like, no matter what time period you're talking about, no matter what the religion is of the group of people you're talking about, none of that matters. At the end of the day, if you stick with socialism or communism long enough, you end up with gulags and firing squads and people getting murdered and authoritarianism always. The only time those things don't happen is when things get so bad that people change. Of course, they stop with the socialism, like we saw in Scandinavia, ironically, which is sort of the primary example of how socialism works. In reality, those people were much more socialistic 50 years ago, and they abandoned it because their societies were collapsing. And so they abandoned those things. They adopted more free market reforms. And so when you're looking at Scandinavia today, you're not looking at Scandinavia, a country that is free market, that's becoming more socialistic. You're looking at a country that these countries were more socialistic, never fully communist, but they were more socialistic, and they abandoned that to become more free market because their system was so bad they had to do that. And so when we say communism is for losers, what we mean is that the only people who stick with this idea truly are losers. And or authoritarians,
wannabe tyrants,
and it's tyrants, wannabe tyrants, or just flat out losers.
Right.
Everybody else is just ignorant, and that's the reality of the situation. If you actually study history, you actually study the ideas of socialism and communism, you play it all out. You look at the predictions of Karl Marx, who, by the way, was like one of the world's biggest losers of all time, personally, just as an individual. And we definitely, I don't even think we need to do a video about Karl Marx because we've done it for Stopping Socialism TV. People can go there if they want to look. But sure. Karl Marx is a huge loser. Huge loser. Had illegitimate children that he refused to recognize. He was sleeping with the maid, you know, that his mom was paying for. It wasn't even his maid. His mother-in-law was paying for his maid that he was sleeping with. And then his illegitimate child he refused to recognize. The guy never held down a job.
Right.
The guy was a horrible racist who said terrible things about virtually every group that imaginable.
Yeah, he's supposed to be a champion of the poor. He hated the poor.
Hated the poor. Hated the poor. The quotes he has about impoverished people are unbelievable. The guy only really liked, in some fashion, other than himself, of course, people who were considered to be, the people in the factories, the people who are the working class people who were in really bad working conditions.
Right.
But everybody else was terrible for one reason or another. And even then, he had all these caveats about those people. If they didn't agree with him, then they were, reactionaries. They were backwoods religious zealots. They were, black or something horrible like that from his perspective, right? Like they were something wrong with them. It was never him. And so Karl Marx is like the quintessential example. The guy who's the face of communism was a gigantic loser.
Yeah.
A gigantic loser. And so it just illustrates perfectly this idea that if you really truly believe that socialism and communism are great, it's only because you don't understand it or because you're a loser.
Yeah,
that's really it, or a tyrant, or a wannabe tyrant.
Right, and you're talking about this kind of at a macro level, like these states adopting socialism and communism, but like this also applies to just public policy and stuff. I mean, obviously, if we adopted some type of socialist universal healthcare, that doesn't make us a socialist country or anything like that, but it is still socializing that industry. Right. So the idea that like collectivism is used as a policy prescription for some societal ill. It's something that constantly comes up, whether it's in healthcare, like I just mentioned, or schooling, colleges, or just different welfare programs, or just basically anything. And again, like I said with the modern monetary theory, like this is the path of least resistance for the people that are in charge. Do we want a policy prescription that actually fixes the root causes of the issues that are plaguing the healthcare system? That would take time, and we'd have to expend some political capital. How about we just offer it all for free?
Yeah.
Because that's the loser solution. We don't want to go the hard route. We don't want to go the route that actually addresses the core problems with these things.
Right.
We just want to wave our government giant big wand and just declare it, boom, free.
Yeah, and what I find so amazing about it is one of the biggest, sort of rallying cries in opposition to people who like free market economics is that, well, the reason why you guys like free market economics is because you guys all have so much money and, you're just trying to protect your money and you don't like paying taxes. First of all, you and I don't have any money, really. We're not rich guys. We didn't grow up in rich households or anything like that. That's number one. But number two, the people who are, if you're going to flip that around on us, the people who are actually proposing these communist or socialistic policies in government are the people who benefit from those programs because they are the ones that get all the power, right?
Oh, sure.
So it's like the people, so on the one hand you say, well, the reason why capitalists, are opposed to socialism and communism is because they're trying to protect their money, and we're not. But you guys are, it's even worse. It's like, at least I earned that money that I'm trying to protect. Like, what you guys want to do is take other people's money and empower yourselves or your pals to go do whatever they want to other people who actually earned the money that they have. I mean, if that's not a loser idea, that you can't earn the money for yourself, so you take it from someone else, or you can solve a problem, so you just take other people's money and try to throw money at it, and that's the solution. Like, that is it's prototypical loser behavior.
The biggest loser aspect of this that I've come across in my own real life, there was a podcast that was dedicated to responding to something you did. I forget what it was. Maybe it was an interview you did with somebody or something, right? Maybe it was a paper you released, or it was something that you did with socialism. Mm-hmm. And there was a couple of guys, probably no more than 20-something years old. They were doing a podcast, and they were responding to you, right? Okay. And they were like, they started off the program talking about, like, why are they socialists, right? And I swear on my life, this is not an exaggeration. The one guy was like, well, I was getting ready to go to college. I was graduating high school right when 2008 financial crisis happened, and it hit my parents. One of his parents lost their job or something, right? So financial hardships. Everyone suffered through it. But he's like, and they couldn't pay for my college, so I couldn't go to college. And I just realized that capitalism is so flawed. There's got to be a better way. It's got to be socialism. It's like, boom, your parents couldn't pay for your college. That's the road to socialism. Like, if that's not the most privileged, point of privilege kind of
exactly
position of privilege, leading to the same, it's just it just screamed loser to me.
Right. I can't figure out a way to better my own life. I need other people to better my life for me. They can't do it. So because they can't do it, then I should go find someone else and take their money instead. So mom and dad won't pay for college, but I bet some rich guy somewhere's got money to pay for my college. Right. So why don't we just go take his money? Yeah. That's the idea, right? And you're exactly right. And you actually see this play out over and over and over again. And they always couch it in this well, we're just trying to help people.
Yeah,
that's all.
It's humanitarian.
It's for poor people. That's all this is. It's just trying to help poor people. But if it was just for poor people, then wouldn't you just design the program so that they only help the poor people and they leave everybody else alone? But no, they don't ever do it that way, do they? No, everyone has to participate.
Here's the best illustration of that possible, which is AOC going to that Met Gala. And, she doesn't have health care for the poor written across her dress in blood or whatever it was. She has tax the rich. What does taxing the rich have anything to do with helping people? Like you'd be better off saying what you're going to do with that money, but it's not. It's like it's coming from the complete opposite direction. Like her goal in life is just to hurt the rich. Like,
Right.
There's nothing less principled than that.
Well, I mean, and again, like, she is rich by most people's standards. She's making like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. She's got multiple homes.
Oh yeah.
She's wearing that dress that she was wearing was like, I don't know, some outrageous amount of money. It was like $20,000.
She'll be doing $30,000 speeches for the rest of her life.
Of course. And so here she is going to the Met Gala with a bunch of people who vote for her if they live in her district, and she's somehow shaming them by having a ridiculously expensive dress written on her that says tax, or on her that says tax the rich.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it doesn't. It's so delusional and ridiculous, but people buy into it because they think it's about helping people. But in reality, it has nothing to do with helping anybody. You can have social safety nets and not have socialism. That's the way all economies in the world have social safety nets. All industrialized economies, they all have social safety nets. No matter how free market they are, they have them. And maybe they could be better. Maybe they could be improved upon. Maybe we could change the way they work. Fine. But that's not what this debate is about. This debate is about, should we collectivize property, even amongst the people who don't necessarily need that collectivization? Do we take their money too? Do we collectivize those things as well? That's really the debate. And does that idea work? We know from history it does not work.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this as it relates to, like I said, at a macro level. We'll probably do like a little bit of a deep dive into some of these countries and the history of socialism. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah,
but definitely as it applies to the public policy that's being prescribed in our country right now. But
yeah.
So those are the three things. The Great Reset, modern monetary theory, communism is for losers. Justin, is there any notable ones that missed out on the list that you can think of? I can think of one off the top of my head, which is China. The Communist Party of China and all of that is a bigger threat on an international scale than you're led to believe. We're going to talk about that surely throughout the course of this show in multiple episodes. That's one notable one. That probably could have been number 3, honestly. Now that I think about it. But
yeah, I mean, I think that I mentioned this to you, and it relates. We didn't really talk about it, but it relates to the modern monetary theory thing. But I mean, the inflation that we're seeing right now, and what's going on with inflation, it's actually much worse than what people realize, because the way that you calculate inflation is actually very flawed, the way that they do it. And the other thing is, you've got the Biden administration coming out and saying now, well, this inflation is happening. Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, it's historic. But don't worry. And yeah, it's not transitory in the sense that it's going to be over this year, which is what they had been telling us previously. But it will be over by the end of next year. Don't worry. But the thing that's crazy about that is, even when they say that, when they talk about inflation being over at the end of next year, what they mean is that the rate of inflation is going to decrease back to the same kind of rates that it's been in the past, right? But it's not going to have negative. They're not saying we're going to have deflation that's going to make up for all the inflation that we had.
Right.
So, I mean, when you look at I think I looked up these numbers yesterday. If you, $1 in 2018, all the way back in 2018, if you, $1 worth of goods in 2018 would cost you about $1.09 or $1.10 today.
Right, 10%.
Okay? So a 10% roughly increase in just a couple of years, right? That's not going away. Even if the inflation goes down, it's not going away. We're never going back to 2018 unless we have deflation, and that's not going to happen.
So inflation goes terrible for the next year and a half by their estimation, right? And their estimation is always going to underestimate it. So let's just take them at their word for now. Let's say inflation is bad, or moderate or bad for the next year and a half. And it's not like we're going to return back to current day levels. The damage is done.
It's done.
The damage is done by then. If we reach levels of 0% inflation or whatever by the end of 2022, the price, like I said, the damage is already done.
Right. Everything's going to be 15% more expensive a year from now than it was a couple years ago.
I'll also throw in there as a notable one that didn't make the list, just like the energy policies that are being prescribed by the left and the Joe Bidens of the world, the Barack Obamas back when he was president, are horrible. They're like devastatingly bad, and we are seeing the ramifications of that right now
not
throughout the
just
world.
not just economically, but for the environment,
Oh,
which I
sure.
think is one of the things that often, we're talking about things that don't get enough publicity. I mean, when you actually start looking at solar panels and windmills and things like that, and we'll definitely do this because we've talked about this
No
all the
doubt.
time for
Yeah.
our jobs at the Heartland Institute. But you actually start looking into those things, you realize there's child labor involved in a lot of it. There's strip mining that would be
A
required.
lot of
If
rare
you
earth materials
a
needed.
lot of mining, and if you're going to run the entire country on windmills and solar farms, you need to destroy like massive amounts of land, hundreds of thousands, millions of acres and things like that in order to actually build all these facilities. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's massive amounts, like the size of whole states that you would
yeah.
have to destroy in order to do this. So I mean, how many sage grouse hens and and how many sage
Sand
grouse hens,
tortoises.
sand tortoises,
Right.
and
Itchy
squirrels? How many thousands of squirrels are we going to wipe out in this process, right? And so nobody cares about any of them. How many birds? How many millions of birds are we going to kill with this massive army of windmills that we have all over the country? So these kinds of things are important. Nobody ever talks about it. They just act like, oh yeah, it's green energy, it's good for the environment, and they don't talk about all the horrible things that you have to do in order to get those windmills and solar panels.
Right. So like these are all things that we're going to talk about over the course of
Yeah.
our show. Nuclear power is going to be one that we'll talk about. We'll probably get into cryptocurrencies and stuff like that at some point throughout the course of our show. I don't know, a ton of other stuff. Population control. That's been like a hobby horse of mine. Just kind of keeping tabs on that.
That's creepy.
That one creeps me out for sure.
Yeah.
Just like limitations on like a meat production in the country, like all of this type of stuff that's like somewhat fringe now by like our current kind of media's perspective, but it's stuff that we are marching towards. That's kind of like the curve that we want to put this show on, the kind of the leading edge of it. Yeah, we know that Lady Ghostbusters 2016 was a terrible movie. We know that. We want to look forward. We want to see what's coming down the pike. That's the show. That's Justin and Donald Save America. Any last words, Justin, before we pack it up for today?
No. no last words. I mean, other than I hope that those of you who are, who don't know who we are, listening to us for the first time, give us a chance. Just give us a chance. I promise you, give it enough time, you're going to learn things that you're not going to learn elsewhere. You're going to hear things that most people are not going to talk about. We're going to make it fun. We're going to make it enlightening. We're going to make it's going to be intelligent. At times it will probably be really stupid. We might stick our foot in our mouths, but at the end of the day, I think when you get to know us, you get to see what we're all about. You'll see that we really are trying as best as we can to find those stories that nobody else is willing to talk about. And so, and not in a conspiracy theory, crazy kind of way, but hard facts, lots of data. At the end of the day, we're think tank nerds. So we like data, we like digging down and finding the truth. And that's what we want to do, is we wanted to do a show that would provide you with access to the stories that you're not getting elsewhere and give you the right spin on it too, so that you can go out there and talk to your friends and your family members and other people and explain to them the importance of these things that they're not hearing in the media.
And the other thing is, obviously the market for podcasts and all of that stuff is very saturated. So if you are interested in this stuff and you do see the importance of this message and all of that, we really do need your help to kind of spread this out there, whether it's just hitting the like button, leaving a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribing to our channel, sharing the content, all of these things. You think that they're like insignificant, but they actually really, especially at the beginning of all of this is our first episode, it really helps. It really helps kind of push this past into the algorithms, get more eyes on it. It really, really does help. So if you can, it doesn't cost you a penny. Hit subscribe, hit like, leave a comment. Anything like that will greatly help us. Justin, where can people go to kind of find all of this?
Well, they can find me, not you, but me, on Socialist Twitter at Justin T. Haskins. and as well as on Facebook and on what's that new one? What's that pro Trump one? The
Oh,
GTTR thing.
well,
You
didn't you
can
come
find
out
me
with a
there. I
newer
actually
one?
really like that. I'm gonna look that up right now so that I can plug them because I really like this.
There's one
This
called like
platform.
Truth. Didn't it just come out?
Nah, but I don't. No, that's not out yet. It's just a waiting list for it right
Oh,
now.
okay.
It's
Yeah,
GETTR, Getter. I guess
right.
I don't know. I don't know how you say it. That one. Follow me there because I actually really like that platform. It's pretty well done. And also Parlor, of course, and
Yeah,
Stopping Socialism. You can follow those accounts all over the place at
yeah.
Facebook and Socialist Twitter and all those other big platforms.
That is absolutely right. StoppingSocialism.com. All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 1. Justin and Donald Save America. I think that is, that is
We
all
have some
we've got
work
to
to
say
do.
this time, for sure. But join us for the next episode. And like I said, we are going to really get deep into some of these conversations. So I really hope that you join us next time.